Don't forget to like and subscribe.
All right, folks, quiet on set, sound speeding, rolling camera, and action. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is not just a filmmaker. He's the guy who makes the film set actually run. The man who wrangles chaos, keeps time bending in his favor, and somehow gets everyone from stars to grips to hit their mark. You've seen his work even if you don't know it, because when the camera's moving and the magic's happening, there's a good chance that Jeremy's calling the shots just off frame. From the post apocalyptic streets of The Last of Us to the emotionally charged world of Don't Forget About Me, to the creative battlegrounds of Ink Master and the great Canadian Pottery Throwdown, Jeremy's career has spanned genres, continents, and caffeine levels most of us can't even imagine. He's helped orchestrate love stories like 12 Dates of Christmas, keeps things spicy on MILF Manor, brought artistry to A Cut Above and wrangled clay contestants, and chaos on Farming for Love. Chow House and the Love Experiment. Now, that's not a resume, that's a cinematic universe of its own. With over 26 credits to his name, this DGC powerhouse knows what it means to live behind the monitor, balancing the art of storytelling with the science of scheduling. He's the bridge between vision and execution, creativity and control. And when the slate claps, Jeremy's world comes alive. So grab your headset, pour your coffee, and settle in because today we go behind the call sheet with one of Canada's most versatile and quietly legendary assistant directors. Please welcome the man who turned scripts into action, chaos into order, and days into masterpieces, Jeremy Marc Poitras. Jeremy, welcome to the
Hey,
show and thank
thanks,
you so much
Chris.
for your time.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to be here and happy to top a little caffeine up with you too.
I love it. So, Jeremy, even in that introduction, and, we're going to dive into this and we're going to jump all over the place because why not? We're having some fun. We can edit later, right? But not many people will know this. And we joke about the caffeine levels, but it's one of these things where you're on set for 12, 18, sometimes 24 hours. Walk us through that bit. Like most people think, you know what? Being in film is a 9 to 5. You're going to wake up and roll in at 9. You're out of there at 6 p.m. at the latest and you're in traffic. Not many people know that, no, actually, you still have a lot more hours to go.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, there are definitely shows where you do make it out into traffic and you cherish those very, very much. But no, it's true. I mean, a lot of these shows are heavy lifts and you do a lot kind of unseen outside the set. You run the set for 12 hours and then you leave and figure out how you're going to build and, run the set that next day. And on some of these shows, you don't really get the luxury of time and prep. So yeah, uptime's important. When you're younger and you can spend a little bit more time in the evening out with people and stuff, it's a lot of fun. It's great for bonding. But as you kind of get into for me, my 30s, that side of things has quieted down a bit, and really it's been a big focus on uptime because there are a lot of shows where you're doing 16, 18 hours and staying healthy, staying energetic, and then staying engaged are really difficult things to do, especially in longer runs. 6 weeks can doesn't seem like that long of a time, but when you're doing 6 days a week and you're doing 16 hours a day, it starts to get in there a little bit. So it requires a good amount of mental fortitude, but also just doing yourself a lot of favors and keeping yourself up. Vitamin B goes a long way. I'll say that.
I love that you shared that because again, when people look at the industry, sometimes they say, "Oh, well, you're behind the camera, you've hit record, and that's really it." And the fact that that's not true at all. But I want to get into this with you here. So, Jeremy, you've worked on everything from The Last of Us to Farming for Love and even MILF Manor. And, it's quite a range, right? From scripted to non-scripted reality. Now, before we really dive in here, if someone said to you, you know what exactly does an assistant director do? What would you describe to them without making their eyes glaze over?
Yeah, right. Well, we do assist the director, but we're not the assistant to the director. Most of the time I'll just say to people, we run the show. We schedule everything. We run the set and we run the crew. Um, and you kind of need a point person, a coordinator to connect all those dots, like you do in any job, whether it's a warehouse or a wedding planning business. Coordinating is one of those human things you will always need when you have a group of people involved and pushing something forward together. You need the beat of that drum, and a lot of times um, you're playing a bit of a role. You're sort of keeping everything in check, but you're sort of playing this. Um, this role of pushing everything forward and kind of the relentless pound of time. So when people ask me, I usually just say, we run the set, we schedule the show, but obviously there's a lot more to it than that. The nuance is incredible.
You've said something really neat here where it's the assistant director, but you're not the assistant to the director. And with what you've explained, some may look at that and say, well, isn't that kind of the assistant to the director? Now, in my mind, it's like, hey, go get me a bottle of water or whatever. No, that's not the job. The job is to say, hey, we have 12 hours, and if you really want that shot, what are we going to cut or where are we going to push?
100%. Yeah, it's very much a collaborative process, and you're sort of assisting the director in gaining their vision. And sometimes, the positivity of the word assisting and the friction that has to happen in creative discussions sometimes, like, yes, we can do another setup here, but that means you have an hour and a half to shoot that scene that you really wanted to shoot at the end of the day and spend an extra time on. So we spend the time here, we spend the time there. We can't have it both ways. And it's usually less of these are your choices. This is what you have to do. It's more of um, these are the optimal outcomes. This is the best way we could do this. This is the most efficient way we could do this to get you the most that you want out of what we have left. And
Mhm.
that the priority changes. For some people, they really need the extra coverage in that scene. For other people, they really want to spend the time on those emotional scenes. And it's kind of whatever is the most important to the director at that point. And those change depending on what the circumstances are and what the elements are. Sometimes you really just want to land that helicopter on the yacht and you do not care about the coverage. You can pick that up in a set, you can build in a stage somewhere, but that helicopter has to land on that yacht. So it's a lot of give take, and like with any creative process, there it's always a give take. There's sometimes friction in between that, but it's all love and war kind of thing. Like it's when you're going to battle together, there's a lot of room for those discussions to happen. And obviously, usually everything happens in a quite positive and an uplifting way. But when the pressure's on and you're under time crunch, being friendly but being firm is usually the way I like to carry it. And for a lot of people that they just want to know they just want to know. They want to be in the know. They want to understand what's going on, and they want to understand the decision that they're going to make and how it's going to affect things. And to kind of know that, you sort of have to have a large, a really like 10,000 foot view. You really got to understand like every piece operationally. I could say, yeah, sure, it's 2 hours for everybody to move from one location to another, but if we're working on a reality show and tech engineering has to move the entire control room, that's not going to be 2 hours. It's going to be a lot longer than 2 hours. So having that understanding, that deeper level of understanding, just gives you a massive advantage in both operational understanding and then in the end, assisting the director.
You said something here that I just find fascinating where, we got to get the helicopter landing on the yacht. It sounds like you've had to experience this firsthand. How many times have you actually seen a helicopter land on a yacht?
More times than I can count on one hand, which which probably not something everybody can say, but yeah, I mean, those are the fun days, when you get to bring all the toys out, the drones, the cranes, the air ops. We did a survival show last year for Fox called Extracted, and that just in itself was a huge undertaking because we were shooting in a 1,000-acre survival zone. And
Wow.
not just that, we were streaming all of the live footage of the 34 camera operators and the 100 and whatever RoboCams that we had live to an HQ 10 kilometers away where all their families are watching live. So you're cutting in a TV truck, you're trying to do all this stuff with everybody kind of spread out, and it's a difficult thing to pull all those strings together. And yeah, like being able to have all the toys out and play with that kind of stuff, it's a blast. It's the best days at work.
Now, when we talk about pulling all these strings, and not many people will know this about you, but you actually had a wonderful career in radio before switching over to film. So, what originally drew you to the world of film production? Why'd you leave radio?
Yeah. I think everybody kind of leaves radio reluctantly. It's a real fun job. There's a massive group of creative, passionate people who are, really invested in bringing the arts of our local communities a lot of times in Canadian music and other things like that to the forefront, and that's amazing. But in order to you know um, do that kind of job, you really do have to live off of the passion. There's not a lot of money on that side of things. There's not a lot of free time in terms of lifestyle, and there's a lot of work that's unpaid. It's a amazing, glamorous job. It's super fun mixing public speaking and tech. And the free beer you get is just it feels unlimited. But for me, like film production, was kind of the ultimate marriage of um, personalities and the creative process and technology, and that's sort of always been my focus. Whether I used to work at Apple way back in the day, and both the retail side and the corporate side, thinking, hey, this will be the people and technology crossover that I want. Sort of the same thing with radio. Very fun, amazing working in a major market. Met some of some people that I'm still friends with to this day, but the financial situation is just not always the best on broadcast side of things. You sort of hope and wish to move into management, and that's how you're gonna, not live out of your car. But there's so much turnover in that industry, and there's not a lot of salary retention.
Mhm.
So for a lot of people, even when you've been in 25, 30 years and have a very storied, established career, you know, a week from now they could clear a lineup and you're out looking for a new job. So it can be a tough industry to survive in, to be able to stomach a lot of the in between for that. So when I moved into doing film and television just as like a side gig in between stations, suddenly I was like, wait a second, there's this whole other contingent of people here that are doing exactly what I wanted to do,
Mhm.
take the creative and take the human side of things and smash them together. But they're doing it in a much more intense way. And for me, I'm a very on-off a guy. I like to do things very intensely. I'm very focused on something when I'm passionate about it, and that kind of felt like it fit better in film and television. And back then, getting paid $250 a day for being a PA, like that was big money. And living in the city we do, it's you constantly have to keep an eye on the finances because when you're paying $2,500, $3,000 for an apartment, that dwindles quickly. So there's a bit of a survival element as well, I think, with it. But at the end of the day, like the passion and the intensity of film and television was just so attractive to me. And then when I started finding the variety of the other facets, not just straight scripted union land, there's unscripted music, live music, there's tons of that stuff. And then, the pure form of of reality television, shooting people in their own little glass bubble kind of experiment. It's all completely different types of filmmaking, but it's all very similar in a way. There's a lot of stuff that travels between them,
Right.
but a lot of people don't do it, and it's so interesting to me because it makes you such a well-rounded filmmaker to be able to do these different types of things. I thought when I left radio that I'd be restarting again and moving into film and television, building a whole new set of skills. But the fact of the matter is those previous experiences carry with you. So as I've moved into more complex sides of film and television, especially like when you're doing complex survival shows and all these things, you need to have a fundamental understanding of things, and a lot of that experience comes from the past. So for me, it was a bigger chance to be able to engage with more people and more types of technology, but it was also just the intensity that really drew me to it.
Now, when we talk about the storytelling, the intensity, the scheduling, the wrangling and dipping around here, radio, for example, you're controlling sound and pacing, right? And then on set, you're controlling people, weather, time, emotions. What do you feel was harder to wrangle, a live mic or the live crew?
I think they're different, but also the same in a lot of ways. And the reason I say that is preparation. It's really nerve-wracking when you open the mic, you don't know what you're going to say. There are a lot of times where you can just go with it, and that comes from skill and time and experience. But preparation really is the key. And I think the nervousness and the anticipatory energy that you feel when you're going into a big day that you've designed and it's going to be challenging, and it is achievable, but it's going to be a challenging day. You're really going to have to push. It's sort of the same as when you're opening the mic for a big break or talk about something emotional or about to interview a band. The preparation really helps solidify a lot of the confidence and calmness. But then, like anything, you jump into it, you get up 10 seconds, you're like, oh, we're here, we're in it now, and it sort of feels over the years, it started to feel more and more comfortable. And like, it's a bit of players on high level sports talk about like how you get into the zone, it starts to become a bit of a flow state, a bit of a, their happy place, even though it's so much pressure and noise and anxiety and pressure to perform. A lot of that really just, I think, elevates, and it's, it's like this for a lot of other people as well.
Mm.
That pressure elevates your performance. And I think it's sort of the same way, like I've stopped, I've tried to stop being nervous and anxious about things because doesn't really add a lot of value, and usually the things that you're anxious or nervous about are don't really matter.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a, you psych yourself out more or less. So I've been finding now a lot of comfort in the fact that you're going into some of these big days on these big shows and people around you are nervous but you don't feel nervous, and I
Mm.
think that just comes from a lot of preparation, and that's definitely a learned skill from coming from the broadcast side of things.
When we talk about this preparation and the beautiful chaos that it is, and some may listen and say, well, geez, it sounds like being in television and film is very chaotic and a nightmare over here, whereas the radio booth might be a little bit more simplistic. Do you ever sort of miss the simplicity, is what I'll refer to as the radio booth, just you, your voice, and the red light of on, compared to the what I'll refer to as the beautiful chaos of a film set? Like both pose their challenges, but are you ever like, oh man, I
Yeah.
wish I was back in that booth.
I mean, there are definitely times, the view, the people, the music, there's a lot of fun. It's a really, really fun gig. But I think the uh, like how fulfilling it is can fade away. It seems very glamorous, but at the end of the day, it's just you in a room with a microphone. So it ends up being kind of a lonely gig for the most part, Like you don't really get that creative interaction a lot of times with people. Like it's very fun. You have people calling in, you're chopping stuff up, you're trying to cue music and do 10 things at once. And, the ADHD brain loves that. But in terms of fulfillment, like it tends to be, just a lot of lonely late nights. And when you have a really great show, or really great performance, or um, just some really put together something really nice, and you sort of finish and you leave and you're headed home and you're listening to it back, you're only the sort of person who gets to enjoy that um, fruit of your labor, more or less. For everybody else, it's a fun beat in the car. For the radio station, it's a little bit of retention that people might come back for and hear ads, but there's no real product at the end of the day, and that can sort of feel a little emptying. So when you move into the chaos of film, yes, it's kind of similar, but the collaboration level is much higher, sometimes too high. But it's the chance, like the chance to work with really interesting people, different types of people with creative minds or very technical minds, and be able to merge those personalities, levels of experience, points of view together into making this thing, and then you walk away from it, and 3 or 4 months later this baby is born. It is kind of a bit of it gives you a sense of pride, those all those 18-hour days, or you're soaking wet and it's freezing cold outside and you just hate this so much, and then that little baby is born 4 or 5 months later, and everybody's so proud of the amount of work that has gone into that product, that it sort of gives you a bit more of a fulfillment, a sense of fulfillment, which I think for anybody in any job is kind of an important thing. A lot of people do it for the art, um, and I think that's great. And I think there's a lot of tastemakers that will continue to drive these mediums forward. Um, I do it for the challenge. I do it for the the sense of accomplishment, to really bring something together. Not to have people pat you on the back, but it's more like, here's this very complicated, very nuanced problem, and here's the end goal. Now figure out how to get there. And that process is usually something that's a little bit unseen and a little bit underappreciated. But when you get to the end of a day, especially a big day, a lot of logistics, a lot of stuff, there is this sort of afterglow of the stress and worry sort of melting away. But you see all the 30 shuttles driving off into the distance, or all the things breaking up, and you're like, man, this is cool. We did that. Bringing all these elements together for sometimes some of the, you go to music festivals, you go to these huge operations, and you see the scale and the size of things in the back, and then you go on to some of these massive film sets, these 15 city block film sets that they've spent 6 months building, that art department spent 8 months dressing, that it's the amount of work, time, and energy that goes into some of these setups and sets is just mind blowing, and to be able to get there and to take all those elements and to play with them is something that's really special, and a great privilege to be trusted with that kind of authority from the people around you, you know?
So, Jeremy, when we talk about, these ADH brains where sometimes it's a lonely being in the booth and you're in this connected community family, and we have all of this, here's a problem, Jeremy, and I need it to fly around on fire and land in the water. It's your problem now. Here you go.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, it's a fantastic challenge. And, the exciting piece is, hey, I have a new challenge. I have a new problem to solve. So I get that, resolve at work of, hey, look, I did it. So, but how do you balance this? How do you balance the calm in the storm and the holding everyone accountable, time, budget, safety, pulling it off? I mean, if we're all, our brains will be very similar. It's here's the problem, let's go do it. But how do we get the calm? How do we do this?
Yeah, I know. I think it just, I think a lot of it, and everybody always says this, but it is true in a lot of regards. And I think it comes with experience. I think you have to be in a lot of house fires to know, um, how to put out a house fire. And I think it's an important piece that a lot of young filmmakers miss. There are things to this day. I've been doing this job 10 years now. I've been in film 15. And there are things to this day where I'm like, never could have expected that this would be the reason that we're at a standstill. But the chaos and the energy, I think, is sort of taken from it's sort of a bit of a top-down situation, and that's something that I've had to learn. I'm very emotive. I'm a very expressive guy, but you do have to play a bit of a character on set, and be much calmer, be much more even keel, because people will take their lead for how you react. There's a story where I was working on a show, and a friend of mine had made an error, a couple of small errors on the call sheet. It was an actor name. It was just a typo. It was an S on the end of a name. Something so minor, very minor, on a massive sheet, 500 crew, huge show. But the showrunner saw this on the Saturday morning at 6 a.m. when they had wrapped, and was furious. Blew up about it. Was mad in the moment. Was mostly just frustrated about the shoot day. Had nothing really to do with the situation that was at hand. But he reacted that way, brushed it off, left and went home, went to bed, and during that 8, 10 hours while he was sleeping, there was a whole stream of action that happened where is this AD going to be fired? Do we eliminate the whole AD team? Do we switch them both out? Because people had taken his reaction and gone, okay, well, this is now we got to run with this. And when he woke up, found out that there was all these wheels turning, quickly put a stop to it, called the AD in question and apologized profusely. It was a private moment where that he let his frustration get the better of him, and people had taken that as, okay, he's angry about this. This is how we have to react going forward, and we have to take some action regarding this. And that's a big lesson because you might just be being frustrated to yourself in a moment in a corner somewhere, and somebody sees that and goes, here we go, and then that quickly can kind of sow through a crew. So I think that like maintaining, we all have a part in maintaining this facade of production. This, we know what's going on, it's under control, everyone is safe, and that's a big thing for people to feel. That somebody has their hand on the wheel, because when crews start to feel like they're getting run around, they stop running as hard and they stop working as hard, and this sort of feeling of dissent can very quickly spread through a crew. So there is a huge element, an unseen element of managing that, and very quickly, because when a crew turns on a production, it's never fun. It's not fun for anybody, because the production will stop worrying about the well-being of the crew, and the crew will stop worrying about the well-being of the production, and it's really not good for anybody, because the mood is bad, but also it's not a fun environment to come and spend 16 hours of your day in, and it affects the end product. Sometimes not as visibly as people would like, but those experiences, those memories of working with certain people or the way that they work can really not only affect how you work with them in future, but also how you as a film crew member operate. People see things and they go, well, if this guy is successful and he does things this way, that means I can do things this way. I can be an asshole. I can be mean to the PAs, whatever it is. And there is a very delicate line that you have to balance with keeping people on side but still being authoritative. And the crews in Canada that we have are fantastic because they understand this process, and a lot of time people want to be led. They want somebody strong who's going to be calling the shots and getting them home earlier to see their kids and their wives and their families. So there's a lot of like trust and responsibility put into that, but maintaining a positive environment around set's a big deal, and being mindful of how me myself, how I'm reflecting, and how my body language is. Because I always make that you can tell when we're behind because I'm I'm a little more stoic and focused, and but people see that and they move quicker, and it's not you don't have to yell at people to say hey you can say to hey guys listen, it is hurry up offense now, we need to move quickly, we got 2 hours to get this done, but it's also holding the other side to account as well. Director, DOP, we have 2 hours to get this. I know you want to bring the menace arm into this, but that's half an hour. So is there a way you can light this quickly without a menace arm? Maybe get us a setup or two. And that's where that collaborative process, kind of comes back into play. But it's a you can't forget about it. It's an integral part of running a set, and it's not something that you as an individual always have control over. There are a lot of other uh, power brokers on set, whether it's the director or the line producer or the showrunner or the writer. Sometimes, there are usually a lot of egos to contend with,
Mhm.
and not ego in a negative way, but people that need to be a part of that process and need to be a part of the decision making. And there's no cut and dry um, hierarchical structure for that. Every show is different, scripted, unscripted, union, non-union. The power dynamic is always different, and being able to understand that, to lead with that, but also to keep the emotional and the set mood side of things on the up as well, is really the real juggling act. Making camera and the actors and everything already, that can it starts to become second nature, but you really have to stay on your toes with marrying sometimes strong creative personalities together in just moving one vision forward. Because when people start making their own movies within the movie, it's usually it's not a good situation for everybody, and it's definitely not a fun situation for the schedule.
So there's a lot there, and I love that you shared that with us. And not very many people are going to know that there's all of this happening in your world. So what are some, I'm going to say, what are some unwritten rules or codes that actors or crew should know, but we often don't. Like we're getting to set. How can we make your life easier? You have all of this going on, problem solving, time crunching, all of this stuff, and the last thing you need is someone like, Jeremy, where's the bathroom? Where's the craft? What can we do to make your life easier, run smoother? What would be some tips and tricks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Chris. And I'll say this, it's a lot of people do come in with a spirit of helpfulness, which is great. The three things I'll say are probably the things I get annoyed with the most are if the answer's on the call sheet, look there first. Where lunch is, when lunch is, what the scene order is, when do we move? A lot of times these can be inferred from the information on the call sheet. People a lot of times will see you and they'll go, "Oh, it's just easier to ask." And I'm always happy to connect the dots for people. But if everybody is asking, if I get "where is lunch" 20 times, my answer for the 21st time will be look at the call sheet. And if it's not on there, then I'm happy to answer it for you. But do a little bit of investigating yourselves. It's very easy to see somebody and want to ask a question, but just take 10 seconds and go, can I find this answer myself? Have I been provided the means to get the information myself? Our job as AD is always to spread information, but I think a lot of people need to take agency and self-solve a lot of the time, because those small questions, those small problems, when you have 1,000 things going on, I'll tell you where the bathroom is, but if you could figure that out yourself, it saves people a lot. The second thing I'll say is don't be afraid to use your own filmmaker instincts. A lot of times there's 1,000 things going on set, and the 10 people that are supposed to be watching for that coffee cup on a table didn't see it. And I'll have people come up to me, while we're rolling and be like, hey, just so you know, like this and this, or this person's mic pack looks like it was loose in the back, or hey, is that weird lamp in the corner that hasn't been on the entire time supposed to be on now? Those kind of things are always helpful, especially when you're working on smaller crews of like 30 or 40 people, and like a house reality show or something like that. Everybody can provide value in the process, not only just in your chosen role, but also for everything else around. We're all filmmakers. We've all been on sets before. We all know when something may or may not be right. Now, to stop a take or to jump in and be like, hey, hold on, we gotta wait, that's a bit far. But to go to the first AD and to say, hey, I noticed this. I just wanted to let you know in case it's a problem. I will take those all day because there's always room for two more eyes to see things and to help make things better. And at the end of the day, that's all what we're trying to do is to make things better. And then the third thing, um, I would just say like use a little bit of like logic and agency when making plans for your own departments. My favorite department heads are the people that I come to with a problem and they hit me with solutions. And that's the best because if I'm having to brainstorm how to run your department, then I'm gonna have to that says to me that I need to be much more involved and really hold your hand throughout a production, which is fine. And there are departments that there's just no way they're going to be able to figure out what's what. When you have 40 people that need to be mic'd in six different locations and you don't know what's going to start filming first, you may have to work with the audio supervisor to be like, hey, listen, I think we should, this is the way I think we should, direct and deploy our resources. And to really help them because nobody wants to be the one that's holding up set. And there is this attitude of it can't be me, it can't be my department. And a lot of people use that and take that motivation into how can we not get caught out? How can we be ahead of the game? How can we make sure that, if something goes wrong, we're right there to fix it? And those are the best department heads to work with. It can be a little annoying for me during the creative process, when you've tried to think of all of the different angles something can go wrong, and then right when you're about to do it, somebody says, well, hey, what about this? And you got to sort of stop and recount everything and put it back together. But it's better that those things happen in the moment than noticing them in post when you can't do anything about them. And there will be times where you'll say, you know what, we can't, sorry, let's roll. And that's a decision that you can make in the moment, but to have the information to make that decision um, is a huge advantage. So for department heads, don't be afraid to run your department. Come to us when you see problems. I try to think of everything I can to make everybody's lives easier and to run a smooth set, but um, there will always be things,
Mm.
small technical things that you may not know or realize. And having in-tune department heads or people that are on set and actually paying attention and being engaged, huge advantage. Something you can't quantify. Massive advantage.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And hopefully everyone out there takes on these three moments, these three opportunities to learn a bit more. And Jeremy, I want to do something here with you, kind of just a bit more of a rapid fire. I got a couple of questions and just whatever pops into your head, that's the answer. Sound good?
Beautiful.
Okay. What was the most did that really happen moment for you in your career so far?
It's hard not to default back to MILF Manor, but I'd
MILF
say
Manor,
watching
that's
a
we're taking MILF Manor.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh, and if you could swap jobs with anyone on set for one day, who would it be?
It's a good one. Honestly, I come from a background of specialty camera operating, so I'd probably say one of the operators. Those guys get to do some pretty fun stuff.
And if your life had a, TV show title, what would it be?
Oh man. Uh Positive chaos.
Hmm. And what's one set 101 rule you wish every actor knew outside of read the call sheet?
Every actor?
Yeah.
I'd just say be on time. Yeah, not like people don't realize the ripple effect of not being on time, especially when you're one of the key players. Be on time, be early, be ready to work.
And what's your favorite animal?
Probably English Bulldog. These guys
Okay.
are little characters.
Favorite color?
Right now it's Papaya. Yeah, I'm a big McLaren Formula One fan, and it's been a long 7 years, but they're winning again. So the Papayas, it's been strong.
And what's your favorite secret show that you don't really love telling people that you watch, but you do enjoy it?
See, I don't believe in guilty pleasures, but I'd say Below Deck. That seems to be Below Deck, and the Vanderpumps are. It's the one that like Seth Rogen and his wife. It's the only show they watch.
And what's something about you people might tend to misunderstand?
Uh, Maybe that the loudness is self-induced and comes from just being me, but it's actually because I grew up with eight brothers,
Hmm,
and if you weren't loud, you weren't heard.
eight brothers. Wow. And Jeremy, where can people learn more about you?
I'm on IMDb. You can also check me out on Instagram. Usually, well, the most recent projects are kind of there. I'm at Germs P. And yeah, I try to post little bits of production and snippets and life, and I'm available everywhere. Reach out if I can help make stuff with you.
And Jeremy, I have time for one last question for you, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Is what makes Jeremy smile?
A lot of things, Chris, but I think at the end of the day, just sitting out on the back deck with an IPA, watching the sunset in somewhere exotic. That's probably my favorite bit. Just enjoying the little quiet moment that you get at the end of a chaotic day.
And as I said, that was the last question I had for you today on Coffee with Chris. Everyone out there, get to Google. You gotta check out Jeremy's work. MILF Manor for sure. I know he loves that show as well. He also did The Night Agent. He also did The Last of Us. He also did the Canadian Pottery Throwdown. There's tons and tons and tons. Get to Google, look him up. Remember to smile to inspire and have yourselves a fantastic day. Our amazing guest today, Jeremy Marc